Here we go. Roll video.
I think anybody creating something new must have an adventure.
It's not cinema, it's something else.
My advice to a young filmmaker is to make a movie every week.
The whole bag of movies can be learned in about a day and a half.
But suspense is essentially an emotional process.
You gotta make films. You gotta make it and get it seen.
Cinema for me is a world of when I dream.
Welcome to Behind the Slate. I am your host, Aaron Strand. I hope you're enjoying our series about not only the life and career of Melvin Van Peebles, but also some of the lesser-known history of Black representation on film. Now, it's often been said that the success of Van Peebles' film Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song heralded a decade of low-budget films led by Black directors, centered around Black characters, and often set to distinct funk and soul soundtracks that later came to be known as Blaxploitation. And while many of you will have seen or heard of some of the defining films of the 70s, such as Shaft or Coffee or Superfly, I wanted to talk about some of the lesser-known titles of the decade that oftentimes don't neatly fit within the tropes of Blaxploitation. And to help introduce us to some of these films, we have a fantastic guest. You may know her from her many years as the programmer of TCM Underground, which aired on Friday nights on Turner Classic Movies, which is how I first saw Coffee and the Mac. You may know her from her fantastic film podcast, I Saw What You Did, where each week she and co-host Danielle Henderson each pick a movie around a theme and share their thoughts, insights, and criticisms. But today, we will mostly be discussing her new book, which she co-wrote with Katoya Murray, TCM Underground, 50 must-see films from the world of classic cult and late-night cinema. Ladies and gentlemen, Millie De Chirico. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming over. We're taping in my dining room right now.
I love it. That's how I do my own podcast. So,
just a couple ATLian cinephiles,
yes,
hanging out,
hanging out in an ATL house.
Okay, very ATL house.
I love it.
You may hear some semi trucks drive by, so you know it's an ATL house. So it's really amazing that you have this book, TCM Underground, 50 must-see films from the world of classic cult and late-night cinema. And it's like this permanent time capsule of your work as a programmer. Now, I have to ask, what qualifies a film as must-see for you?
Oh, my gosh. I am not incredibly particular when it comes to like the definition of like things like, because I think when I grew up, when I was a budding cinephile and especially like a cult movie gal, there was always this like pressure to have seen things. And I think there was a lot of people who were like hard selling me on titles like, I can't believe you've never seen, Cannibal Holocaust. What's wrong with you? Like that type of nerd shaming, Yes. To me, I don't have that, like, if you don't see this movie, you're trash type of attitude. I'm just like, if you just have like a genuine curiosity, if something is like really, really weird and interesting and like kind of above the norm, that's a must see for me. Cause I feel like people should just be watching lots and lots of movies anyway. So
yeah. I think that like, this is something we really relate about, which is like very opposed to this sort of exclusivity around film culture. Like the barrier for entry, like it should not be high. And anyone who's loves movies, like you should not be setting the bar high for entry and like that total like, oh, if you haven't seen XYZ, like,
yes,
what are you doing?
I mean, that's part of, I think, what my work has been over the past, like, 20 years is that I'm not trying to create an environment of like cool kids only type of thing. I feel like that stuff works itself out organically, really. Like, I don't need to make people feel excluded when it comes to film culture. I feel like good taste rises to the top. Like, people who have good taste and are cool, they rise to the top organically. I don't need to like figure that out for people. I'm just going to put everything up there. And if you like it and it's cool, then that's what happens. And if you think it's weird and gross and trashy, and you don't like it, and then it's just not for you. But, I don't want to be that type of person that's like, making those decisions, because I grew up in that culture, as I just said, and it sucked. So, like it was really hard, kids. So, I don't want to like encourage that kind of snobbiness.
I think that's also like a real skill and like a real testament like to your career, that you've championed so many hard to see films, lesser seen films, but have done so in such like a gracious and open way, and without that snobbish mentality.
Thank you for saying that, because I really do feel like that era it's over, or at least becoming over, because I think that's what happens when you open the world up to people that aren't just like, I don't know, straight white guys or whatever. Like that's how I grew up, is that I've spent time in like video stores and record stores, and everything that I was learning was from older straight white dudes, right? And they were kind of the like ambassadors of cool things. And I feel like once the world has opened up to other people to be a part of that whole gatekeeping thing kind of just dissolves automatically. Like, and I'm not saying, I mean, you got to know things. It's not like I'm saying like anybody can join, you don't have to know anything. But I also feel like, if you want to join the world, it's easier than ever. And if you want to learn about cool things from people who are of all different stripes, that can happen too. It just wasn't my reality when I was growing up. You know what I mean?
For sure. I'm curious, was there a movie, like a cult movie that was like you're in, like where you were like, whoa, this is what movies could be?
Yeah. I mean, there's at least one, if not two. The first time I ever saw a movie called Faster Pussycat Kill Kill.
Go for a wild, wild ride with the Watusi cats. But beware, the sweetest kittens have the sharpest claws. For your own safety, see Faster Pussycat Kill.
I don't know if I can cuss on this podcast.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Okay, because that shit blew my mind. I had never seen anything like that before. I didn't know anything about Russ Meyer. I pretty much didn't know anything about the exploitation world at the time. I was just very, very like, starting out.
Yeah.
And I could not believe I was watching these women like beat up men, and women of color beat up men. Like there's an Asian woman who was carrying a switchblade, and I was like, holy shit, like this is blowing my mind. And I just never thought movies could be like that. Like it really, really changed me as a person. So that one is definitely one. But then, there was also like movies that when I was kind of in high school and college were things that were just really hard to see. And they were kind of these like holy grail movies. And one of them was this movie called The Story of Ricky.
A boy with a special power. Born with the strength of 20 men. He was sent to a correctional facility where the laws of survival take precedence over the laws of man.
And it was brought to my attention because I don't know how old you are, but I don't know if you remember the very early days of The Daily Show.
Yeah.
With Craig Kilborn.
Yes.
But they used to have that section of the show called 5 Questions. And it was basically this like, they used this clip of this. It was basically like a kung fu movie with a guy that's like claps his hands against a guy's head and it explodes. Basically, it's an exploding head. And I was like obsessed with trying to find out what that movie was. And I could not find it. I mean, obviously this was like pre-internet days. So I was like, do I go to Blockbuster? Like, how do I find this movie? And I had to basically come downtown and go to like a cool video store in an alleyway in Little Five Points, the old Blast Off Video, and I talked to somebody about it, and they told me what it was, and then I had to track it down in another very sketchy way. But like anyway, that was the second movie that I think that I was like, I had to hunt it, and it was like the thrill of the hunt.
Yeah.
That really like formed me as like, I was like, oh yeah, I'm like really a cinephile now. I had to like go into an alleyway and pay somebody to make me a VHS dub. You know, like it's so weird. But it happened. So
that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that. I haven't seen that one. What did you call it? What was it called?
It's called The Story of Ricky or Ricky O. It's like
Story of Ricky.
Yeah.
Is it like a Hong Kong movie? Is it Shaw Brothers type?
Yeah, I honestly I feel like I don't know if it's probably out on Blu-ray at this point because it seems like a lot of things are. But it was like and I can't remember who the guy was that played Ricky O. Don't kill me, people. I forgot. But it should be out there. Yeah.
Nice.
You don't have to track down a VHS dub of it anymore, I think.
Oh, okay. You don't have your hookup, your guy?
I don't know what happened.
You can't text me his number? You got that Ricky O, man?
No, I don't even know if that guy's still alive, to be honest.
I hope he's doing well.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm super excited. Speaking of just sort of like introducing like new movies and like opening the doors to movies that have never been seen before, we're about to discuss 5 films from your book today that kind of don't fit into the Blaxploitation genre, but touch upon changing aspects of representation in film throughout the 70s and 80s. And all these movies were first watches for me. I never saw any of these movies until 2 weeks ago that we agreed to do this interview.
Amazing.
So this has been this has been totally mind-opening for me. It's been really fun. So I want to start in 1971 with William Crane's Blackula.
Yes.
Blackula. Dracula's soul brother. Deadlier even than he.
Okay, so I'll give a little spiel about each movie and then we can talk about it. Okay,
Yes.
So Blackula, directed by William Crane. The film is about an 18th century African prince named Mamawalde who visits Transylvania to petition Count Dracula to end the transatlantic slave trade. But Dracula reveals himself to be a racist vampire who then bites Mamawalde and traps his beloved wife, Luva, in a crypt. Fast forward to 1972, 2 gay interior decorators purchase the decor of Castle Dracula and ship a coffin to Los Angeles, awakening Mamawalde. The prince-turned-vampire tries to find his long-lost love, whom he believes has been reincarnated as a modern woman named Tina, but his romantic efforts are complicated by an insatiable thirst for human blood that attracts the attention of Dr. Gordon Thomas, a pathologist for the LAPD. The film stars the Shakespearean actor William Marshall as Mamawalde, Vanetta McGee as Tina/Luva, and I actually don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, Thalmus Rasulala?
I think that's a good shot.
Okay, Thalmus Rasulala as Dr. Gordon Thomas. It was produced by the exploitation label American International Pictures, which was owned by MGM. They held several promotional showings in New York, and anyone wearing a flowing cape would get free admission.
Ooh.
Blackula would then go on to gross over $1 million and become one of the highest grossing films of 1972. So when did you first see Blackula?
Gosh, probably in college. I was, definitely on a tear of like black action films, or definitely on an American International tear. I mean, Blackula is such an evocative title for a film.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I gotta watch Blackula. Like, what the fuck? This is a great. Who came up with this? So it was probably in college, I would say.
What stuck out to you, like at first in watching the film, and then like what sticks with you, today?
Well, obviously that it's a tale of a black vampire, which at the time I had never seen. Like, so much of like, what our notions, at least for me at that time, was that it was a Bela Lugosi thing. Like, Dracula was a white dude and was from Eastern European origins. And like, what I mean? It was like, you just imagine that Universal Monsters type of thing.
Right.
I was immediately like, well, yes, I mean, this is cool to see a black vampire, period, number one, but that, he's sort of like a Dracula-like character, right? Because he's very commanding and he wears the suits and the little medallions and all that stuff like that. But then that's, I think, ultimately what made that movie memorable for me was the fact that you have somebody like William Marshall who is a classically trained actor. I mean, actor is what he is. I mean, he's basically like Shakespearean taught, and like he's, you know, I mean, he's an incredible actor. And in a way, you're kind of like, wow, if like he brings a gravitas to this movie that, you know, is really amazing, and probably, you know, he's probably too good for the American international scene in a weird way. You know what I mean? I hate to disparage AIP, but I love you, but it's, you know what I mean? Come on.
Yeah.
Like you got like a guy with real chops, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, I think that is what kind of made it for me over the years, was just the idea of William Marshall, the fact that it was pretty much like an all black cast with a black director. And, you know, it's like those types of things, like, you know, just kind of stick out. So
it's definitely cool how they like bring this idea of vampirism like into like slavery, colonialism, like, and the way this like curse is like passed on. Very political statement within that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like, you know, what the director William Crane was trying to do. I mean, I think he was trying to make a legit vampire movie that was speaking to the black experience specifically. And, you know, I think he wanted to make it a very, I wouldn't say serious necessarily, but he was definitely like, he had a serious mind to make it, and wanted it to be like a legit movie, not just like some schlocky stuff. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that. I think it definitely comes through in the film, that it's got those themes, you know what I mean?
Just circling back what you were talking about with William Marshall, on the one hand, it's like he doesn't fit in within the universe, but it kind of works because like Dracula doesn't fit in with the modern world, and like he is this like transplant from like a different age. And William Marshall like comes out with this like deep voice, and he's also like he's sexy, and he's like trying to woo this woman, and they end up like consummating the relationship, and like, yeah, it's so in so many ways it shouldn't work, and yet you can't imagine Blackula working with any other actor.
Oh, I know. You're totally right about that.
You write in your book here, I have a little blurb.
Ooh.
I have blurbs.
Oh my gosh.
I got blurbs.
I'm nervous.
Oh, no. Great blurbs.
Okay.
Beautiful blurbs.
Okay.
Okay. You write, quote, "In the many scenes featuring Dr. Thomas, his frustrations with his mostly white colleagues in the department have to do with convincing his white superiors to take the mostly black victims in his case seriously. Race also informs the remarks of the white morgue attendant, played by the classic character actor Elisha Cook Jr. Is that how I pronounce his name?
Yep.
Elisha? Okay. Elisha Cook Jr., who I mostly think of from Stanley Kubrick's The Killing.
Yes.
So Elisha Cook Jr., he wheels a victim, Juanita, out to be examined by Dr. Thomas, and he comments that black women who drive taxi cabs are promiscuous. And Dr. Thomas has to kind of like fight, you know, it's not even like a big deal, but he like has to subtly kind of like dismiss this guy. And it's like, there's little moments like that I think to a modern audience, or like maybe on a first watch, like they might just like pass you by, because like we don't realize how revolutionary they were at the time.
Yeah, that part, I mean, that is kind of, I think, what I was saying earlier about William Crane trying to insert a bit of that information into the film, because, you know, that to me is, I think, what makes a movie like Blackula a little bit more, I don't know, it kind of raises it a little bit into a movie that is doing a lot more than I think people thought it would. Like, I think people like Blackula, black vampire movie, got it, AIP, fun, but there's so much of that in the film. Like, there's this kind of intertext almost that is like, if you study it as much as I have, because that's my chronic problem, is that I'm always like rewinding and like wait, what was that? Like, I'm always like trying to find like these little pockets of meaning.
Yeah.
And like that to me really stood out, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I think that sentiment is still, unfortunately, a part of like, people still think these things about black women, and there's definitely like biases towards, like, to me, in healthcare is like a perfect example. So it's just that moment where you're like, oh God, that is literally happening now, and it's in a movie from like the early 70s, and it's in Blackula.
It makes me think, like, and like you said, like these are still problems today, but like this movie's, being in production in 1971, is released in 1972. These are years, often considered of like maybe the most like active, like serial killer years in the country, many of whom were targeting, women, often of color or sex workers. And they were not being caught because these people were considered less dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Than, sort of like white girl victims or whatever.
Totally.
And so for this line to be in this movie, like at that time, before these things were even like big news stories, is incredibly prescient.
Yeah.
And like is worthy of highlighting.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like, I think that's what the book, especially for Toya and I think that's kind of like what we were trying to do with the book, is to take a movie like that and maybe like find these points that really spoke to us. And I think as women, we were just like, oh wow, what a line to say. This like Elisha Cook Jr. kind of this like, comedy foil type of character is actually saying something that's like, I don't know, like there's something there to that to think about. And I think that's how we processed the information that we saw. Like when you watch the movie, that's how I watch a movie, is like, again, going back and forth and being like, what was that? That's a weird thing to say. I can't believe that guy did that. That's crazy.
And I can also look in my own movie watching past. And the reason why I never watched Blackula was because I was like, Blackula, get it. 70s, schlock, get it. Like, done. I already know this movie.
Yeah.
Without having watched it.
Totally. And I think that I think is the bigger point really to some of these cult films, is that they're fun. Obviously, I'm not trying to say that some of these movies that we wrote about in the book are like high art necessarily, but I feel like as a viewer, there are sometimes you come at any kind of text and you're thinking about it in ways that are maybe like what people didn't expect. You look at something like, I don't know, half of the things in the book, if not everything in the book, and people are like, oh, what a fun romp. And it can be a fun romp and it can be weird and crazy, but sometimes you have these little nuggets of meaning. And Blackula is a little bit more than just the schlock to me.
I totally agree. Well, we're going to move beyond Blackula to even deeper vampiric waters here. Ooh. With 1973's Ganja and Hess. So, this one directed by Bill Gunn. The film is about an anthropologist, Dr. Hess Green, who becomes a vampire after his assistant stabs him with an ancient cursed dagger. When the assistant's wife shows up, she and Hess become lovers, and he turns her into a vampire. However, in a state of disillusionment, Dr. Green returns to a Christian church and commits suicide by prostrating before a cross, leaving his lover, Ganja, to remain a vampire. The film stars Dwayne Jones as Dr. Hess Green in his only other starring role other than Night of the Living Dead, and Marlene Clark as Ganja Meda. This movie, man, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm kind of speechless by it.
Yeah.
I'm left speechless.
Yeah, this is so when the book, when Toy and I were coming up with how to write it and kind of what we were both going to do, we decided that we were just going to pull a list of all the titles that had ever aired on Underground, and it had been on for 17 years. So there was over 400 titles that had aired. And, we went through the master list and we're like, okay, this one. And, she picked 25 and I picked 25 to write about. And we only had I think it was only 2 movies that we both picked. And this was one of them. We both wanted to write about Ganja and Hess, but then I was, of course, like, take it. Like, I would love to hear your opinion on Ganja and Hess and how it influenced you. So, this was something like in the book that she really, really went hard on, and it's great. She talks about it in such a great way, but such a mind-blowing movie that I think only now is getting its flowers in a weird way. People did not know about this movie 10 years ago. It really wasn't out there.
What is it about this film that made you put it on that top 25 list?
I mean, I just think it's so unique and so interesting, and it's very like, it is like a piece of art to me. And I, am very fascinated with Bill Gunn. I think that his career was really fascinating, and he, I don't think was able to do all of the things he really wanted to do in his, it's sad, and it goes back to the ideas of like who gets to make art and who doesn't. And unfortunately, I think as a Black man at that time, like, I think that he wasn't just given everything that he needed. Especially when you think of people like Jordan Peele or something now. I mean, it's like you need like a person like Bill Gunn, like, he could have done so much more if he had just lived in a different era or like lived longer or whatever. It's sad. But yeah, I mean, and it's taking this kind of like old story, like the concept of vampires, right? And the Dracula stories, the kind of stuff, is kind of like a standard type of story. But then the idea of taking it and making it his own and making it like very different, I think it's very of the era. I think it kind of talks about addiction, in a like that is a component to horror and specifically vampire lore that I think is an interesting path to take.
Totally.
So, I mean, there's just a lot going on, and honestly, like, it's beautiful. I mean, just beautiful. Like, the two most beautiful people to be in a film. Like, they're like golden. I mean, it's incredible. So
yeah, the film is it's wild.
Yeah.
I think my first impression though is that like watching the movie, I'm imagining like some sort of like a script coverage intern at a studio, like reading the script. First of all, it's broken up into 3 parts. The third part like takes up like more than half the movie. So like that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the major action happens off screen or like they're just like referencing it. And the majority of the film is like kind of stoic characters like sitting around and, like talking about like what happened, and it like exists in this weird place of like the subtext is like being actually spoken out loud, and like but sort of deeper meanings are like constantly being hidden. There's wild dream fantasy sequences throughout. You have a protagonist which like I feel like on the surface is like from Hollywood standards quote unquote unlikable because he's like depressed the whole time. He's like moping around. I don't think he smiles once in the entire film. Like he shows nothing of like being in love or it's like and then he commits suicide at the end, which his assistant does is like talking about at the beginning. Like suicide is like throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the one technical thing that I have to add is that the audio is a little rough.
Yeah.
Gorgeous visuals, audio is a little rough. So all these things together, conceivably, you would watch this movie and be like, well, good try, but like better luck next time.
Yeah.
And yet, the movie operates on a level that is really deep. The kind of stuff that like you really just don't come across in films a lot. And I watched this maybe like 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And the second that it ended, I was like, okay, something like just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to my bedroom, like where my wife was, and I was like, I just watched a movie and like, I don't know what I think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like sticks with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, this was again like a film that I just had heard about for so long, and it just was almost like hard to track down, like all throughout, my not childhood necessarily, but my teen years and my 20s. Like I was like, never going to be able to see this movie. Like I'm just like, I'm going to give it up. But then I guess it was maybe like over a decade ago, or maybe a little bit longer, is when, they started finding, like doing the restoration work on it, put it out on home video. And so I got to see it, and, a restored quality, which I'm very thankful for, because I think if I had gone down the VHS dub route, it would have been like, because it was called all these different things too. Like, I think at a certain point when it was released, they tried to go the like exploitation route, and I can't remember the alternate title of it, but it was like Blood something, like Blood Family or Blood something, being promoted as an exploitation film, as opposed to like, I think it's like an art film, to be honest.
Totally.
And that to me, I think is ultimately what it comes down to, and why I think that it rocks people so hard, because it is such an artistic endeavor. Like, it is really like a person who is making art, and he has a statement to make, and maybe there's a lot of ideas, and he was trying his best to work within the confines of this like hard to navigate Hollywood racist fucked up system, right?
Yeah.
And that's what kind of came out, is like this story where the characters are not perfect, and there's a lot of like, I think as part of the era, this very kind of like, I mean, it seems very countercultural almost. It's got kind of this like hippie vibe to it in a way. It's very visually like stunning, like you said, and just very like, I don't know, kind of like an acid trip or something. I hate to, use that, because a lot of people say that's kind of the vibe of some of these films, but I just think it's very special. Like, I mean, people weren't making like Ganja and Hess like at all before it came around. I mean, it's amazing. So
yeah, no, it's really unique. And as someone who's watched a lot of movies, like, you come across this and you're like, okay, this is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah.
For a movie that's now 50 years old, like this year.
It's mind blowing.
To hold up like that.
Yeah.
What's a moment that like when you think of Ganja and Hess, like what's the image or sound that like pops into your head?
Well, I think it's when the Bill Gunn character is like shirtless, and he's I guess like in that mode where he's, I don't know if he's on his knees at that moment, but I think it's like one of the suicide moments,
like after he gets out of the tub and has like the pistol. Yeah, I mean, that is such a evocative moment for me, like, and I think that they ended up using that in some of the promotional materials. Like, I think that because I remember seeing a still of it once, like going through Instagram or something like that, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, yeah, that's like the part that really stuck out to me. There's a lot, and like a lot of like in the house, when you're like watching them in the house, and there's just like that house with the decor and like the furniture and stuff. It's in the house itself. I mean, it's just kind of Baroque or something. Yeah. It's a lot. It's like a vibe, as the kids say. It's definitely a vibe.
Yeah.
Again, from the book, quote, Bill Gunn didn't want to make a vampire film when first approached to do so by Kelly Jordan Enterprises. It was 1972 and Blackula was close to being released, so producers wanted in on what was sure to be a novelty treat at the box office. Gunn took the $350,000 offered to him, but instead of a down-the-line vampire flick, he made an art house film about a man in spiritual crisis and made him a vampire doctor for good measure.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So I'll make a vampire movie, but I'm gonna make it my way.
And you really feel that throughout. Like, the vampirism it's important, and yet it feels kind of just like a surface level. Like, the real issues that are happening are much deeper below the genre.
Yeah, I think it's being used in a kind of like, it's a symbolic thing more than just a straight down the line, like I think that when he decides to turn her, when Dwayne Jones's character decides to turn Ganja, I think it's not necessarily like a thing that we've just kind of classically seen in vampire films, like even like the Hammer movies or something, like where it's like, you're mine. Like, I think there's more to it. I think that that lore, the vampire lore, is being used a little bit less on the nose. It means a lot more symbolically.
Just an amazing film. Also, shout out to a previous guest on this podcast, Chris Sieving, who just wrote an entire book about Ganja and Hess, which now I have to go read. We were talking about it for our other interview, and he's like, yeah, I have this book that just came out about Ganja and Hess, and I was like, haven't watched it. So
wow, what a great book to write.
Yeah,
I gotta get that too.
Yeah, so we gotta check that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm gonna move on from sort of out there vampire films to this really lovely kitchen sink drama called Five on the Black Hand Side.
I don't mean to be dipping into y'all's business, but you've been corporatized, blackularized, and superflied. You've been macked, hammered, slaughtered, and shafted. Now we want to turn you on to some brand new jive. You're going to be glorified, unified, and filled with pride when you see Five on the Black Hand Side.
So this film, directed by Oscar Williams, is based on the play by Charlie L. Russell. The film centers around the Brooks family, wife Gladys and her 3 children, Booker T, Gideon, and Ruby, as they all come into conflict and eventually stand up to their overbearing father, John Henry. At first, Gideon and Gladys use militant protest tactics, including a list of demands and picket lines to change John Henry's ways, but they are ultimately persuaded to shift their approach to love and black power by Ruby's fiancé, Marvin. At Marvin and Ruby's wedding, the buttoned-up conservative John Henry dons an African dashiki and dances with his wife, showing that he's willing to concede some of his overbearingness. The film stars a fantastic starting 5. If this was a basketball team, this is a dominant starting 5. You got Clarice Taylor as Mrs. Brooks, I think is just the absolute runaway star of the film.
Yeah.
Leonard Jackson as Mr. Brooks, who's clearly having so much fun playing an absolute prick.
Yeah.
Virginia Capers as Ruby. Glenn Turman as Gideon, amazing actor who I mostly know as the corrupt mayor Clarence Royce from The Wire.
Yes. I knew him from A Different World. He played, and he was also in so many things.
Yeah, he's constantly popping up. Well, in this movie, he's like 20 years old. He's ripped to shreds.
Oh, I know.
He does this like shirtless kung fu routine on their roof, and he's like this man's body, like he looks like an Adonis. It's wild. And then Derville Martin as Booker T. And of course, he would go on to direct Dolomite later in the decade. So just absolutely stunning cast. Which is your favorite out of these 5 family members?
I mean, I love Glenn Turman. Like, I just, I don't know. It's so hard to pick, you know, like, I love him as an actor. Like I said, I grew up watching him in A Different World, and he was like, God, I want to say he was like the ROTC guy or something. He was like a military guy in the show. You know, you just have seen him in so many things. And, you know, I saw this movie. I didn't see this as a kid. I saw this much later. And so anytime he was on screen, I was like, I don't know. I just get the feeling of remembering him from my childhood and from so many things. So I just like follow him in the movie.
Yeah. I love that. Like when actors have these like, you know, 30, 40, 50-year careers, and like you're growing with them, and like you always have like carry those certain memories, and like, and it's so crazy how like our brains do that, where we attach like past performances onto their current one, and all of a sudden like they gain gravitas over time. It's just such a weird.
I know. I mean, I'm guilty of this constantly, where you will watch something that's on TV like right now or something, and then you're like, who plays the dad in this? Like, who and then you're like, oh, he made like 150 movies. Like, right. You're like, or whatever. Like, if you watch like Succession, you're like, oh, Brian Cox has been around forever or something. You know, you just think about it, and it's kind of mind blowing because there are so many people who are still acting from those days, from like, I mean, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and they're still working and doing things, and they're kind of being reintroduced to like a whole new generation. So
yeah. Now, when it comes to Five on the Black Hand Side, like, how would you pitch this film like to somebody who's like doesn't know anything about it?
Yeah.
And like, sort of, what elements would you highlight to like get them to a theater to see it?
Well, I think it's interesting that you called it a kitchen sink movie, because it is that thing, and I think that is ultimately like what, as a programmer, I think, you know, there was a kind of, I don't know, a conversation that I might have had with myself at a certain point, because TCM Underground was on for a really long time. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, are we like, what are we doing? Are we only going to be playing like Eraserhead? You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, like, how do you sustain a franchise, you know, and have this like a very narrow view of like what could appear on this late night franchise, right? And so to me, I thought it was appropriate to play a movie like this, because it's like, it's not one of these movies that comes out as this, it's not like this, it's not Gauge and Hess, it's not Eraserhead, but it is interesting, and I think is a cool story to show, especially considering it's like a black family, you know, I mean, I think that belongs as part of the franchise. And like Toya, who unfortunately I wish she was here right now because she loves this movie and she wrote about it for the book. She really championed it as something for the book. Like she wanted to write about it. She thought, okay, maybe this isn't like the most culty cult exploitation schlock film. But it is important to talk about. I think more people should see it. It's kind of like, there's another movie, I don't know if you're about to say it, but I'm going to risk saying it first. There's a movie called MMA that's also in the book that is very similar, like in that way, where it's not like, I think people kind of thought it's a Blaxploitation movie because there's black people in it, right? Yeah. You know, and you're like, actually, no, it's got a lot more going on. And that's kind of how I feel about this movie too.
If anything, like this movie is like anti-schlock. I mean,
Yes.
and like anti-Blaxploitation.
Yeah.
Every opportunity where, you know, you can imagine yourself as a writer, you know, writing the script. And of course, this was a play before it became a movie, but you can just imagine like sitting down, there'd be ample opportunity to throw in a weapon, violence, sex, like making some sort of escalation point.
Yeah.
And it really consciously doesn't do that. It
Yeah.
stays true to what it is, which is a family drama.
Yeah.
And within the context of movies that were out in 1973, like that is a statement in and of itself.
Totally. I think it's like, it was kind of like revolutionarily, it was not an action film, it's talking about people, right? And I mean, I think that in Hollywood, certainly at that moment, everyone was like, well, you got to be Shaft. You got to be on the street, like shooting people, and like the police have to be involved, and we have to have a guy rolling over the hood of a car or whatever. It's like what black movies are. And I just feel like that's obviously not true with this movie. It's a great film. I mean, I'm glad that you wanted to talk about it because I feel like it's one of the movies in the book that I think is like a little hidden gem, you know?
I had never heard of it. You know, the other thing that I think is worth like bringing up is that like the film attempts to bring into sort of like 1970s feminism and like women's lib, like as like the next logical step, like beyond civil rights.
Yeah.
Basically, like you have this Gladys, the mother character. You know, she's like her husband is kind of like micromanaging her. He makes her like show him her schedule book every day, and he like gives her notes on like how she should schedule her day, and he's like, this is when you should take a walk, and she's like totally beaten down, and it's just like, and this actress who plays this character is so evocative, like her face is just like seared into my memory. And then she like finally opens up to like some of the other women in her building, and she's like, today's the day I'm gonna leave him. And instead of like being like, yeah, like get out of here, they're like, no, we're going to make him change. And so they like start this picket line like out in front of the house. And it's like, I don't remember what their signs are, but they're like, men need to change their ways.
Yeah.
This is like big stuff. I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's bold. I would love to be doing that kind of stuff right now. like making people change. Like seems like such a futile task, but hey, I mean, they tried it. It's great. Like, yeah, it's such a fun film. And like, I don't know. Like I said, I think it's one of the more unsung films in the book, which is interesting because I think she and I were both trying to really like highlight stuff that was important for us personally. And I know that this movie means a lot to her.
If you're listening, thank you so much, Toya, for putting this in the book. I would have not seen it otherwise.
We should have flown her in from France to have her talk about it. So. She could have been in the ATL house with us.
Yeah, let me work on that budget, on that French flight budget for this podcast.
Yeah.
Let me check my blurbs. I kind of think we covered some of my blurbs. Oh, well, this is important. From the book, quote, 5 on the Black Hand Side is possibly the first film of its time to capture the inner machinations of the barbershop, a place where lively dialogue and interaction take place. So the father, John Henry, he runs this male-only barbershop with no women allowed.
Right.
He goes so far as to like desanitize like the air after like a woman like pops her head in. It's like totally crazy.
Yes. Over the top.
But they like spend a lot of time in this movie just sort of like sitting with the characters as they tell jokes and like riff with one another. And as modern audiences, we of course have a million references to like place this in time.
Yeah.
But I guess in 1973, like no one had, at least maybe white audiences, had no idea that this barbershop culture existed.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, is that like that it takes movies to like really kind of, in weird ways, to kind of explain these like cultural specificities of people. Like, and that's the thing, is that I don't think a lot of white people knew that that was a thing either. I don't know if I could ever recall seeing a barbershop scene, a black barbershop scene in a movie before this one.
And I think in some ways the barbershop scene has developed its own conventions at this point. I mean,
definitely.
like especially like Coming to America, like has like kind of locked it within a certain expectation of at least my brain as an audience member. What this movie did, though, that was really cool, and because this kind of all ties into like our series about Melvin Van Peebles, is so Melvin Van Peebles, when he was growing up in Chicago, his grandfather owned a barbershop around the corner. And he has a quote from some interview somewhere where he talks about like once he got to college and he was learning about philosophers, like Greek philosophers debating in the agora, he imagined in his mind the setting was his grandfather's barbershop. And the way these guys talked all day was like Greek philosophers in the agora.
Yeah.
And the way this movie like handles some of the scenes in the barbershop really like brought that story of Melvin's life to life for me.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. I mean, that's so cool that's what I love about movies. God, I could talk about that all day. It's just like the sort of things that remind you of other things that are on your mind. And I love that you made that connection point. That's so cool.
I mean, movies can be such a powerful vehicle for experiencing the world. Like I know I've talked in previous podcasts about like traveling to places.
Mm-hmm.
If I've seen a movie from that country, like my experience is totally different.
Yeah.
It gives me a sense of place, a sense of storyline, a sense of like character.
Yeah.
And that's powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, a little bit about myself, if you will.
Please.
But, both of my parents are immigrants, and my dad is from Italy and my mom is from the Philippines. And I remember seeing Lino Broca's Manila and the Claws of Light for the first time and was like fucking rocked by that. Like, I was like, I cannot believe that I'm watching a Filipino movie taking place like in the city, like in Manila, a place I've been before. And it's just like, it really like, I mean, it just was like a huge moment for me, because I was like, yeah, I mean, that's why it's important for like international films to come to America and like we can have access to these things, because it's like, yeah, I mean, movies are just like such a way to be able to experience things that are outside of your scope, at the present moment. And I was like, I remember seeing that movie and being like, holy shit, like obviously they nailed it because it was there, but it was that moment where it just took me back to like being there and just the vibe, and like I could smell the smells and experience the heat and, all that stuff. I mean, it's amazing.
My wife's parents are both from India.
Yeah.
Both Indian immigrants. And we went to India before our wedding, which
Wow.
like probably shouldn't have done, because like expectations of marriage are like very different over there. So we were like, I was like going and meeting my future extended family, but they were sort of like, why are you here? Are you asking our permission? Are you just like telling us like, what is this?
Sure.
So, and we were like going on this like tour de force across northern India, like meeting all these people.
Yeah.
And it was very emotional. It was a very difficult time. I mean, just travel is hard in and of itself, but then it's like, you want to be accepted. You want all this sort of pre-marriage stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not even like the right part of India. And for anyone who's listening, yes, I'm very aware that Delhi and Agra are very different than West Bengal. Mm-hmm. But my love of Satyajit Ray movies, like it gave me some just bearing of place.
Yes.
And some bearing of of something. I don't know. During these like car rides between these cities, like I would think about the movies and I would feel just slightly more comfortable, as if like a part of me had been here before.
Definitely.
And I didn't feel so alone.
Yes. Yes. Oh, totally. I mean, everything about it is through the movies. I mean, I just came back from a trip. I went to Europe a couple weeks ago, and England is a big country. There's a lot of like, the minute I got to England, the first thing I was like, I want to go to the train station where they filmed Brief Encounter.
Yeah.
And my friend is like, I think that's like a 4-hour train ride. I was like, oh, it's not just down the street. That's the only thing I know about England or whatever. And I mean, that is so funny, because that's the thing about travel and watching films, is that you're just like, you feel like you said, you've been there before. In the same way that it's like that barbershop moment reminds you of like Melvin Van Peebles and like his experience. It's just like the power of film, the power of cinema.
It's also so funny that you were like, I went to England, and the second you were like train station, I was like, Brief Encounter,
yes,
Brief Encounter.
Exactly. And like, it's so funny because my friend that lives over there was like, I mean, I don't think she's seen Brief Encounter. I don't even think she cares about movies from the 40s or whatever. And she was just like, okay, nerd. Like, what the hell?
You mean they're not all lean heads over there?
I know. I was like, sorry, I just want to go see a train station. So.
I want to run out after a train.
I know. So embarrassing.
It's amazing. I love it. Don't be embarrassed. Be proud. Okay. So moving away from our barbershop kitchen sink drama.
Yes.
While we can celebrate and enjoy and appreciate Five on the Black Hand Side for its humanity, for its slice of life realism, that doesn't mean that we don't enjoy a good ass kicking / assassination plot. And that brings us to 1975's Friday Foster.
Hey Friday, what you doing, girl? Hey, what you doing, girl? What you doing? Hey Friday, what you doing, girl? Hey, what you doing, girl? What you doing? You better keep your nose out of trouble. When you smell it coming, you better get out, get out, get out, get out. On the double.
Wow.
Okay, Friday Foster, directed by Arthur Marks. The film follows an ex-model turned magazine photographer, Friday Foster, who, after witnessing an assassination attempt on the nation's wealthiest African-American, Blake Tarr, she teams up with a private detective named Colt Hawkins to investigate. Soon they discover a plot to eliminate the country's African-American political leadership. This cast is ridiculous.
Yes.
So again, first time watching this movie, the people that just keep popping up on the screen. Okay, we got Eartha Kitt. We got Carl Weathers in his second ever role, and he doesn't even say a single word in this role. He's like a silent hitman.
Yes.
We got Scatman Carruthers.
Love it.
Godfrey Cambridge in his final film role ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yaphet Kotto.
The best.
And then, of course, the absolutely magnificent Pam Grier.
Yes.
I mean, I can't believe this cast exists.
I know. I mean, it's like nothing but the hits, you know? This is another like Toya film, by the way, but we had discussed, we played a lot of the Pam Grier films on Underground.
Sure,
obviously.
of course.
And when we were trying to come up with, I remember there was a discussion of saying like, because this was happening a lot, where we were like, okay, you have multiple films made by these like very classic exploitation cult people, be it John Waters or Pam Grier or, just like these people like Roger Corman, this kind of stuff. But here we have this opportunity to talk about movies in the way that we want to. And like, let's shoot our shot, dude. Like, instead of taking a movie like Foxy Brown or Coffee that we felt like had been written about a lot.
Sure.
Why not pick something like Friday Foster, which I feel like is a movie that doesn't get talked about a lot in terms of Pam Grier's filmography. Like everybody, kind of gravitates obviously towards Foxy Brown or something, But like, I think Friday Foster is a great film, and she's so gorgeous in it. I'm like, oh my God, it might be my favorite look, maybe, of hers.
She's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think her performance and just like her as an actress, like, because it's like, the whole time I was watching this is like, you could take her performance, her role, plop her into a new movie in 2023, and it would feel absolutely modern.
Yeah.
There's not a single dated note outside of like the clothes and like the story content.
Yeah, exactly.
The way she carries herself is so of our time. Like, what do you think that is? Like, what is that about her?
I think she has like a naturalism to her. And you're an actor, I'm not, so please correct me if I'm getting some of this wrong.
I know nothing.
Okay. But I think it's clear when people are trying to act in a weird way. Like I feel with her, she just has this like quality about her. And maybe it's a confidence to this. She's the most beautiful woman of all time or something, but she has, it's like a naturalism. And I think it prevents her from being like a character actor in a way. Like she's like, in a way that she's like, okay, well, I'm making these films and they seem to be kind of roughly in the same wheelhouse, right? Black action, that kind of thing. But I think that she kind of rises above it because she's not consciously aware that she's being the like badass, you know what I mean? Like she's being a person who is playing a role or something. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, whereas like I feel like a true character actor like knows that it's a performance,
The first thing that comes to mind is like she's said in interviews, like, well, I didn't mean to be like a ass kicking like woman. Right. Like those were just the roles I could get.
Yeah.
Like I like took risks and like not because I was so gutsy, but out of necessity. Like I wanted to work and like these were the roles I could get.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's like, she had to be aware, which like is then even more amazing that she was able to like bring this totally like off the cuff, like realism to it. I mean, it's just blows my mind.
Yeah. I mean, as like a survival mechanism, it's like she knew like, this is my career, but she wasn't gonna like be corny about it. I guess that's maybe what I mean, is that there doesn't seem to be like a corny quality to her.
At no point does she ever like judge her material.
Yes. That's important.
Yes.
Because I feel like they're like, I don't know. I start thinking about, this is maybe this is like a new road. Like, I apologize if I go down this road and it doesn't apply to the rest of this podcast.
Derail it. Let's derail.
Well, but it's like the concept of like kind of people being consciously aware that they're in cult movies. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yes. Such an issue.
Yes. I think it sucks. I think it's unfun.
It's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Like the way that like I for some reason like pops in my head like Sharknado.
Yes.
It's like this purely like constructed cult movie and it's like, no. You don't get it.
Yeah.
Plan 9 from Outer Space is amazing because Ed Wood believed with all of his heart that this was like something good.
Yes.
Like it's the earnestness.
100%.
If you're not earnest, like I have no interest.
Yes. It has to be real. It has to be earnest because beyond that, sorry, I just spit on your spit guard on your.
That's what it's there for.
I know, you're going to have to disinfect the shit out of this after I leave. Like, when people like are aware that they're making this like campy, crazy thing, you can tell as a cult movie audience, like you can pick up on that kind of stuff. I mean, I can't unfortunately feel that it's way with like Nicolas Cage. Like I see Nicolas Cage movies, I'm like, ugh, okay.
Absolutely.
He's doing it.
Yeah, he's doing it again.
Yeah.
All with this knowing wink to the audience of
Yeah.
like, look at me being crazy. And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
that's not what I go to the movies for, dude. Like, I don't go for ironic sarcasm. Our world is filled with ironic sarcasm all the time. Like, I can
Yes.
go to Twitter. Like,
Yes. And that's the thing about, to your point about the Pam Grier thing, that I feel like she accidentally stumbled into being an icon. Right? She wasn't like coming to set every day being like, I'm Foxy Brown. I'm the most badass motherfucking bitch. And I'm like, no. Like this was a job. You know what I mean? And, most people that are just working and they're making earnest films, like these people who are making these, historically like quote unquote like bad films, they didn't come at it being like, I'm making a bad film, I can't wait for people to think it's bad. Like it's like no, they were making what they thought was art, you know, and it just missed in some way. Like the translation got missed somehow, and then it ended up being this cult film. And I feel like if you can't reverse engineer that shit. Like you can't be like, well, let's make a weird cult movie.
Absolutely. This is such a great point, and it is such a core belief of mine as a watcher.
Yes.
And you know it when you see it. Like you feel it in your gut. And it drives me crazy.
I know. I think people are they're so thinking about like the viralness of things now in film. Like where they're just like, we got to make a movie about a sassy girl robot because we got to go viral. Like and not to say that I didn't enjoy Megan. Okay, don't get on my case, people, but I'm just saying I enjoyed it. But it's like, you knew you were watching something that was a viral sensation before you were actually watching it, right?
Right.
That's crazy to me.
They're watching themselves do it. The act of making art all of a sudden becomes performative in and of itself, which at times can be harnessed by like a really great artist to bring this extra element like into a film. But when it's on a corporate level, when it's like Jason Blum, like master crafting some sort of marketing strategy, like for these films, which like, unfortunately, like in our modern film economy, and like movies have always existed at this weird cross section of art and commerce. Like we totally get that. There was never a platonic ideal of artistic movie making.
Right.
And yet that element today, and I think with especially the way that social media and it's like churn for content has brought a really cynical aspect to movie making that I find repulsive.
And it's, you know, it's interesting too, because Hollywood seems to me to be so anti-experimental these days.
Oh yeah.
That you couldn't even accidentally make a bad movie. Like you couldn't, like they will even allow you to do that.
But it's why like a movie like Cats is like, it kind of feels like a miracle.
Yes.
It's like
100%.
This movie like should not have been made.
Yes.
And yet it was.
Yeah. But it's like that is what will persist throughout this like modern conceit of film, is that you're like, oh, but they will definitely give some rando trillions of dollars to make this overblown insanity, and nobody will watch it. Like, or like people will be like, what the fuck is going on? That gives me the hope, is that like the flops, like just the pure box office flops. But it's almost like, you know, unless you have, if you're like a Ed Wood, like you're like a one-man band type of guy, and you just somehow, because that's like hilariously enough, a lot of cult movies, that's how they happen, is because it's like some rich guy had a specific vision and they wanted to do it too. They didn't care. They were like, this is my life's work. I mean, that's like Timothy Carey, that's like, you know, Ed Wood, like all these people making these like magnum opuses or whatever.
Magnum opie.
Opis, yeah. And you're just like, God bless you. Like we that's your thing. Like you did that, you know, and you're like, wow, it's shocking. But I think that's kind of like what I mean about that Pam Grier thing that we just talked about. Is just that I feel like she kind of existed outside of like her own sense of who she was in the culture, you know, in a lot of ways. And she didn't know it until much later. She was like, oh yeah. I'm like, I was just working. Y'all were the ones that made me a star, which is cool because she is one.
So there's a quote here, and then I want to tie it back to like this specific moment that like for me really embodies this quality.
Yeah,
of Pam
yeah.
Grier. So from the book, quote, while this isn't her most iconic role, the film feels like a sea change from her previous work as a sassy, hard-nosed, independent woman. Grier had embodied these elements effortlessly in films such as Coffee, Foxy Brown, and Sheba Baby, but it's fun to see her downplay her action star roots in Friday Foster. Mostly free from the racial stereotypes commonly seen in Blaxploitation fare, Grier's Friday is a simple career girl, vulnerable and scared, but brave in the face of danger.
Yeah.
And now the moment of this film that sums up this quote and then brings into this quality that we've been talking about is that shower scene. So it's like, it's a sexualized shower scene. Here's Pam Grier naked in a shower. You know, we're seeing her topless. And then Carl Weathers, as the assassin, like comes into her house, She catches him at the last moment. He like dives into the shower. She runs out of her apartment and grabs a towel and is running down the hall, but is like ostensibly naked and like soaking wet. She seeks solace like behind a family who's like walking into their apartment. And then she has this standoff with Carl Weathers in the hallway. And she's so vulnerable, you know, just covering herself barely with a towel.
Mm-hmm.
We've just seen her naked. And she looks at this guy who's trying to kill her. And in her eyes, it comes over with this like incredible strength. And Carl Weathers like stares her down and decides like, this is not the moment. And he backs down the hallway and she survives. I mean, and for her to play it with just like pure honesty.
Yeah.
When like, you know, your body's being exploited, you know, you're, you know, being like this character put into a dangerous situation. It's got like all the things and she plays it so well.
And just the idea of this was not the movie where she pulled a gun out of her afro and just shot him or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it played out in a totally different way than I think what other people had seen her in, you know what I mean? Yeah, totally fresh for that moment for her. And, you know, I think that that's a testament to her talent where she can be both. She can be, you know, both types of women. They showed this somewhere. I was traveling recently and I saw this. They were playing this at a theater that and I was like, I should go in there and watch it because I haven't seen it, I think, since we aired it. But I just remember when we were pulling the stills from the film, I was like, God, she is probably her most beautiful. Like, I don't know, just love the look, like the pantsuit looking with the camera around her neck. Yeah. I mean, she's just so pretty.
Absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Just amazing. And great dialogue.
Yeah.
Doesn't drag. It's like witty, but like they never like indulge in like jokes or anything. Like the plot keeps like moving along.
Yeah.
It's like tight 90 minutes.
Love a 90-minute movie.
Dude.
90 minutes or less, people. I prefer.
And great soundtrack.
Yeah.
Great theme song.
Yeah.
Also a real testament to car thievery in this movie. She steals like 4 cars to like drive after various bad guys. Never faces repercussions for her car thieving.
Oh my God. We always talk about that, how it was so easy to steal cars in the 70s. Like a lot of times people just kept their keys in it. I'm like, that just seems wild to me. I could never imagine. Like
the movies must have ruined it because so many characters are just getting into cars that don't belong to them.
I know. It's like we talk about that on the podcast, Danielle. I'm like, here's another car with the keys just literally sit in the front seat. And now Robert Redford is driving it away or whatever. You're like, cracks me up.
Oh my gosh. Well, if Friday Foster is maybe a high water mark of sort of Blaxploitation like themes, and we're going to jump way ahead 13 years to an actual a loving parody of the genre.
Yes.
Of course, I'm talking about I'm Gonna Get You Sucker.
Yes.
From 1988.
No. It's got passion, pulse, rhythm, and soul.
Preach, brother!
Who are these guys? It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
I'm gonna get you sucker. Dirty mother. Don't say that.
I'm gonna get you, sucker. Even if you can't say it, you got to see it.
I got you, sucker.
This film, written, directed by, and starring Keenan Ivory Wayans, is his feature film debut. The film is about a soldier, Jack Spade, who returns to his hometown of Any Ghetto, USA, where he learns that his brother, Junebug, has died from an overdose of gold chains.
Yes.
Vowing to destroy local chain lord, Mr. Big, he seeks the aid of aging local hero, John Slade. Together, they form a crack team of Blaxploitation characters, including Kung Fu Joe, Fly Guy, Slammer, and Hammer. The film stars Keenan Ivory Wayans as Jack, Bernie Casey as John Slade, Antonio Fargas as Fly Guy, Steve James as Kung Fu Joe, Isaac Hayes as Hammer, and Jim Brown, the NFL player, as Slammer. Janet Du Bois as Ma Bell, Dawn Lewis as Cheryl, and then in smaller roles you have Damon Wayans, Chris Rock, and Kim Wayans. I mean,
yeah,
fabulous film.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. I swear I wish Toya was here because she, weirdly enough, programmed this movie for Underground. back when it aired. And it was funny because I loved this movie growing up. I thought it was so funny. Like the whole, I mean, obviously like the iconic scene of like Chris Rock going to the fast food place and asking for
one rib.
Yeah. I mean, I used to laugh and imitate that all the time when this movie came out. But like when she first came to TCM, I had already been there for many years, but then she was like, she came to my desk and she was like, I'm just obsessed with Underground and I would love to work on it with you in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, yeah, dude, of course. Like, love it. Like, I love like anybody that like knows what I'm doing in the middle of the night. Like, I love it. And so I was like, you should go through some, and program some things. Like, give me some ideas, And this was like at the top of her list. And I was like, oh my God, we definitely have to play this movie on TV, on TCM, because it's like so funny. And honestly, like it is like a love letter to those films. I mean, obviously you've got Bernie Casey and Jim Brown, like Isaac Hayes. I mean, it's like all these people that were a part of that era, but it's still funny on its own. It's like, it's not going into the world where they're like making fun of these movies. It's like truly like this is a part of our culture and but we're celebrating it while also making this like really funny sight gag type of film. You know what I mean?
What do you think makes this film stand out from like other parody films, which I think can oftentimes like they really don't stand up for me, and can feel very like of their time and place.
Yes,
and they either have to be like so zany that they're like off the wall, like Top Secret or something.
Yes,
but this one like stays true to its parodiness, and grounded in a actual like plot.
Yeah.
While still being so charming. How does it do that?
Yeah, I think it was like. Because obviously, I think the Wayans family has done very well for themselves in the parody business. We did an episode. Oh my God, we did an episode like a couple of years ago of the podcast that I do about the Wayans family, and we were like we gave it like a 20-word title because we were like it should be like a dissertation on, and we ended up talking about, God, I don't even remember what we were talking about, like white chicks or something, but it was like bringing like this film discourse to these movies that are probably playing on TV right now like 5 times in a day.
Right.
I think that this movie is more subtle, obviously, than all of the subsequent Wayans parody films that come out. I think that the Keenan Ivory Wayans character is one that you ultimately root for. And there's like a love story in there. Like you're just like, oh, this is like a fully realized film that is also like a parody of a Blaxploitation movie. So you're right. It has its own beats, And I think that's what makes it less over the top.
Yeah, talking about earnestness, the love story of this film, so often in these like comedy movies, the love story feels really kind of shoehorned in there. But Cheryl, his love interest in the film, plays the story like with such like an emotive earnestness, and it's like a little over the top, like it's exaggerated. It sort of like reminds me of like Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
Like Seymour. She's kind of like bringing some of that energy to this.
Yeah.
But it really works, and it does like ground the film in something real.
Yeah, and because ultimately when they like staff up or whatever, when it's like go time, you do feel like like this is awesome. Like, and I think that it's not. I think that's because the Keenan character is developed in a way to where you're rooting for these people. Like, I don't know. I think that is really what it's about for me, because I agree that like sometimes the parody films it is like one thing right after another, and you're just like, okay, we get it. But I think if you let it breathe a little bit, that's what I think happened in this film, is that it gave it a chance to breathe a little bit.
Do you have a favorite character from this movie?
I mean,
because there's so many great ones.
I know. I mean, the dudes, like the old school dudes, like when you see like Antonio Vargas, like when all those guys come back, you're like, hell yes. Like, I just love it. I love, like, that to me was so, that's what makes this movie so great for me, is that it is like a celebration of those films, but like those actors, like Isaac Hayes, like Jim Brown. I mean, Bernie Casey is the dude. Like, you're like, holy shit. Like, he was in some amazing shit. And I just love that. And they're all wearing like sports coats or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, I like when they like are wearing normal clothes and, you know, like, is it Jim Brown that's wearing just like slacks and a sports coat? I don't remember. But, you know,
it's like they're all like old dudes.
Yes,
and like they like really lean in.
They're like wearing grandpa pants. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I love all these guys. So.
Yeah. I think Kung Fu Joe's got to take the cake.
Oh,
for
I
me.
mean, duh.
It's, it's so awesome.
Oh, shit.
You know, the other thing, like for me, so I'm 33 now, 33. So I grew up like, you know, Scary Movie came out when I was like 12. And like I was not into it. Like it was like I just didn't get it. And at that point, the Wayans family, brothers, whatever, had already sort of like staked their claim in pop culture. And I just wrote it off as like, I'm not interested in this. Like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And to see this movie, again, first time watching it, and then like to do some reading and place this in his career. So this is like crazy. And I'm sure you know all this, but for our listeners here, like Keenan Ivory Wayans, he's a scholarship engineering student at Tuskegee University after growing up in New York City. He drops out in his last semester of college to pursue comedy. And he's like one of the older brothers, I believe, if not the oldest.
I think he might be the oldest.
So that's like a huge thing. I mean, like you're an engineering student from a lower income family, and like you're almost at the finish line, and then your poor parents, you drop out to pursue comedy.
Pivot.
Yeah.
Like, what?
So despite that, he works his way up through the comedy ranks. He co-writes Hollywood Shuffle with Robert Townsend.
Amazing.
The following year, he writes the opening sketch for Eddie Murphy's Raw, all before he gets to make this film where he directs, writes, and stars in. And you guys have a detail in the book about like studio execs trying to make this a white film with like Anthony Michael Hall and Charles Bronson. I mean, like, gag me with a spoon. And then a few years later, he goes on to create In Living Color.
Yeah.
That sort of like, that is an incredible story. That is a miracle story.
It is.
And it would totally be missed on me.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea.
Yeah. I know. I'm older than you. I'll throw that out there. So I grew up with In Living Color. Like I was, you know, like a kid of the late 80s, early 90s type of thing. And so I was obsessed with In Living Color. Like I watched it every week. It was like prime time viewing.
Yeah.
Like for me and my friends, and we would, oh my God, I swear to you, there's like a VHS tape in my parents' house right now in Florida where my sister and I are probably doing fake In Living Color sketches.
Oh my God.
Like we definitely would do Homeboy Shopping Club. Like we were, you know, obsessed with like, there's like I think it was Kim Wayans played the like Jamaican woman. There's like a Jamaican character, like everything, Men on Film, Fire Marshal Bill, like all that stuff. We were like, I swear there was like there's a videotape out there where we're doing reenacting sketches. So I saw I'm Gonna Get You Sucker after I saw In Living Color because it used to play on TV. Because I think once the success of that show, they were playing that movie a lot on cable, like on TBS and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it for the first time and being like, I mean, it for me felt like more subdued than the show. Like I was like, oh my God, like this is like an actual feature-length film with like the people from In Living Color, but it's not like like there's not these like giant characters in your face, you know, like that kind of stuff. It was more of a movie. And I was rocked by that. Like, I was like, holy shit, this is like something. I didn't realize that they had done anything prior to that at all. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, like for me, this movie I found out about much later. And then when you realize that his history goes further back, you know, you're just like, holy shit. Oh, yeah, he was with Robert Townsend. I mean, come on, that's crazy. Like he used to work with Eddie Murphy. Like, you're like, wow, that's like an incredible career. And then just to think about like, his entire family is like in the business or has appeared in like films and TV shows is crazy. Like, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
What a family, you know?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. As an only child, I'm like, I can't even comprehend it, and I'm like very jealous.
I know. I was like, I wish me and all my siblings were incredibly successful. That's amazing. Like, you know, like, and you're just like, because that's the other thing too, is that like I think a lot of people, kids these days, only know like Marlon and the youngest one, like those two guys that are like, they're working. I mean, Marlon is actually like kind of an older guy now. I think he's in his like 50s or something, but like there's like a younger, and then the sons, Damon Wayans' son is in stuff, like he's on TV shows and that kind of thing. So it's just like generations are now involved. Like it's not just like the siblings, but it's like their grandkids and their kids. And I mean, it's crazy.
The Wayans and the Coppolas.
I know. It's amazing.
2 peas in a pod.
I know, right?
Okay. So these are the movies we've covered from the book. But before I let you go,
okay,
I want to play just a little question game.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. So, and if anyone's still listening, I put this at the end of the podcast because if you're still listening, then clearly you love me or Millie.
You love movies.
Okay. And you love movies. But Millie and I also share another interest outside of movies in that you're also a basketball fan.
I am. Yes.
So I am a huge basketball fan. I'm always trying to like tie like sports and movies together like in my head and like bring together these artsy fartsy like my like artsy fartsy loves with my love of the NBA.
Yes.
Okay. So here's a 2-part question for you. And it doesn't have to be like super official or whatever, but just sort of off the cuff.
Okay.
Question 1. Who is your favorite director?
My favorite film director?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. What am I going to do here? Oh my God. This is so hard.
I know.
Oh geez. I don't know if I want to put it on one person. I'm trying to think of somebody that I have seen, because now I got to break this up. Like, okay. Are we talking modern? This is so nerdy. Classic Hollywood era? Modern still alive people?
It could be anything.
Okay.
You know, unbound. It's just, you know, anything you want. I would say like, who is the person that like, when you think of like, they embody like my ideals as like a movie goer, as like a movie person, as like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Honestly, it might be somebody like John Carpenter. You know, John Carpenter is like one of those folks that I've seen like every John Carpenter movie, and I've enjoyed pretty much every single one of them.
Amazing. Great. We can totally go with John Carpenter. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Don't let me think about this too much because I will be here all day.
I totally empathize.
Okay.
So got John Carpenter.
Yes.
And you could change your mind in 5 minutes.
Yes.
But for right now, it's John Carpenter.
Okay.
Okay. What NBA player from either modern era or in history would you say, if John Carpenter was to be reincarnated as an NBA player, who would he be?
You know, John Carpenter is a huge basketball fan. Did you know that?
I have no idea.
Oh my God, huge.
Really?
Oh yeah, like huge.
Is he a Lakers guy?
I think so. Right? Because he can't be like a Golden State dude or something, right? Where is he from? LA? I don't know. But I think he used to tweet about basketball.
Oh.
And there was all these like rumors or like stories about him where he would not come to events because he was watching basketball.
I love it.
Like, he'd be like, I'm not coming to the AFI tribute because I'm watching my games or
Fucking
whatever.
amazing.
Okay. Oh my God. I don't want to get this wrong because he loves basketball so much.
I have an example of my own
that
I could throw out and sort of like maybe like set some parameters.
Give me some metrics. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I know it's totally unfair because I thought about this beforehand because I thought of the question. Okay. My favorite filmmaker, and you know, I keep thinking that I'm going to revise this, but I just can't. My favorite filmmaker is Akira Kurosawa. It just is. I know it's a film bro take.
Yes.
But it just is. He just hits the buttons for
me. Of course. Totally understandable.
Now, if Akira Kurosawa was a basketball player, I think he would be Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
And here's why. Here's why. Now, Kurosawa was not the like young firebrand that young Kobe was.
Sure.
But here's my reasoning. They were both ridiculed as sort of try-hard imitations of like contemporaries or others. Like Kurosawa was always like, well, he's not as Japanese as Ozu.
Sure.
Whereas Kobe was always like, he's not MJ. He's just an MJ imitator. And he's not as real as Allen Iverson.
Yes.
Right? He's playing to the audience.
Yes.
And like Kurosawa got the same, you know, sort of criticisms.
Yes.
Okay. They could do it all though. They could do the old school. You know, Kurosawa can hit you with the samurai films. He can hit you with a noir, like a contemporary noir, like
yes,
you wouldn't believe.
Yes.
Okay. They both adopted a warrior ethos, like to their craft.
Yes.
You know, and like identified with this sort of like samurai mentality, like
yes,
towards their work. They both had this like mid-career, like traumatic event. Obviously, Kobe with the accusations
yes,
and like all that like we didn't know if he'd come back from it.
Yes.
And Kurosawa attempted suicide in the mid 70s. Yet they both came back and like reinvented themselves as these sort of like philosopher artists and like had these late career successes that like were really like not guaranteed by any measure.
Yes.
And then finally like they both like created this cult like following that really shepherded in the next generation.
Yes.
Like all modern NBA players like worship Kobe in a way that like LeBron would never get that kind of adoration.
Yes.
Whereas like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas like literally paid for Kurosawa to keep making movies. Like that's how indebted they were to him.
Yeah. Wow. That is really good. That's a really good textual analysis. I love that. Okay. It's hard. I feel a lot of pressure to get this right because knowing what we know about John Carpenter being an NBA guy. If you're listening, Mr. Carpenter, I really don't mean to disrespect you.
But thank you so much for listening.
We appreciate your support.
Really appreciate your support.
I mean, part of me wants to obviously go like a Dennis Rodman or something like, because he's got like, he makes these like horror movies and maybe he's the Detroit Pistons in the late 80s. I don't know. He's an entire team. Bad Boys or something. I don't know.
He's Isaiah Thomas
yes,
and Bill Laimbeer.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe he's
Joe
not
Dumas.
like, pushing people on the court like Bill Laimbeer, but he's, like, I don't know. To me, he kind of reminds me of a rebel in that way. I don't know. I mean, I don't know who your team is.
I'm a Lakers.
Oh, you're a Lakers person. See,
fan,
I'm a Hawks person. Okay.
Have you been a Hawks person your whole NBA fandom?
Yes.
What was were you?
Well, I did like the Bulls in the 90s. I mean, everybody did.
How could you not?
So I was like obsessed with the Bulls. And I also, I really loved Christian Laettner when I was in middle school. And
wow.
I know.
What an admission.
I know.
I
know.
I was embarrassed that I hadn't seen any of these movies before, but that was quite... This is like taxi cab confessions over here.
I know. I did not, obviously I had no ties to Duke in any way, but I was like, oh, he's so cute in middle school. And then I was like, oh, but he's an NBA player and he kind of sucks. He was a Hawk too. If I could pick, because now I'm thinking about this in terms of the current Hawks, right? If there was a current Hawks player who would be like John Carpenter, I think it's either John Collins or DeJounte Murray. I like formidable, like John Collins is kind of like the dad of the team, and I respect that. DeJounte is like a good player, consistent. John Carpenter makes consistently good horror movies. I don't know. This is like such a hard thing to...
I know. It's just like such an on the spot question.
Yes.
But like, I think actually I really like your John Collins. I'm gonna latch onto the John Collins comparison.
Okay.
Now, just within the context of the Hawks, because I think that like if we were to take all of NBA history, I think John Carpenter is like higher up the totem pole than John Collins is
100%
of all NBA history. But just of the modern Hawks.
Yes.
Because like does the dirty work, like gets in your face, but like also underappreciated.
Yes.
And like isn't like, I don't think he's like necessarily always put into positions where he can succeed.
Yes.
Like the offense is so Trey-centric and Collins has gotten totally sidelined. He's asked to do things like that, like he shouldn't have to do. And like, I feel like Carpenter, like that's in a way that's like characterized some of his career. And yet he keeps like putting out gems.
Yeah.
And like,
and also John Collins is not afraid of a shorter inseam on the shorts than everybody else. He's really, and I feel like John Carpenter has, I don't know if I met John Carpenter once a long time ago at the TCM Film Festival, and the best thing that I remember about him, because he was very, very nice to me. I was only around him for maybe like 20 minutes. I had to like escort him for a film. He was like introducing 50s science fiction film or something. And of course they're like, we're going to put you with him. You're going to make sure he gets out of his limo or his car or whatever. And I was shook. Like I was like, I can't believe I'm about to meet John Carpenter. He was super nice. The one thing that I thought was so cool about him is that he was wearing baseball socks, like stirrup socks. So he was just wearing like his classic like middle-aged guy outfit, and then he crossed his legs and his pant leg came up, and he was wearing like those weird stirrup socks that you'd wore like t-ball in like middle school. Like they're not the actual separated stirrup. They're like this stirrup painted on the sock type of thing. I was like, what in the world is this? Like he was wearing like, that's a fashion choice. And I feel like John Collins does that with his inseam. He's got, I swear it's not a 5-inch inseam, but it's like, he's really showing off the quads. Like in a way that nobody else on the team really is. Like everybody's got the long shorts and he's kind of wearing those shorter shorts. And I'm like, good for him. Like he's showing he's showing his legs off, and God bless you, dude. Like what a choice. What a fashion choice.
This is the kind of in-depth analysis, the in-depth inseam analysis you can only get here on Behind the Slate.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you this right now. If you ever want to start an NBA film podcast, let me be a guest, because I would love to chop this up all day.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Is there a baseball or a basketball film podcast that talks about classic films and directors alongside NBA players? Because I think you started something.
I don't even know. I don't even know how it would work. Like, just,
I think what you just did is the podcast going like Akira Kurosawa is, whomever, and here's why.
Okay.
Here's Kobe. Like, this is why.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, man. Yeah,
think about it. I know you don't need another podcast, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to start it, I would listen.
That'd be dope.
Yeah.
That'd be really dope. I will say, as a companion piece to your meeting John Carpenter, I got cast in a NBA inside the NBA commercial.
What?
Like 6 years ago.
No.
Dude, I was freaking out. And here's the thing is that the commercial actually shot like right down the street from my house over in Glenwood.
Oh, wow.
Like by the Glenwood Kroger. And there was a rain delay on the shoot. And we were supposed to knock it all out in one day. And they're like, oh, we have to cancel early. And I was like, oh man, like maybe I'll just get cut from this commercial, whatever. Like being an actor sucks.
Yeah.
Instead, I get a call 5 days later and they're like, actually, we want you to come down to Studio J on Inside the NBA night, and we're gonna knock out this commercial like in a studio across the hall.
What?
Yeah. So then I'm getting my makeup done in the hallway with Charles Kinney, Shaq. And
Oh
Ernie.
my God, I know.
And I am freaking out, and like I'm trying to stay cool, but like but like I'm also like trying to throw in a joke.
Yeah.
Because I want to be a part of it.
Oh my God.
But then I'm casually in the hallway. I'm like waiting to be called to set or whatever. And Isaiah Thomas like walks up next to me.
Whoa.
And he's like, hey man, like, how's it going? And I like had a book in my hand, like a screenwriting book. And he's like, what are you reading? And I'm like, oh, it's this book about Joseph Campbell. And like, he was like, oh, cool. What's your name? I was like, Aaron. And then like trying to like, I don't even know what I was thinking. I was just like, what's yours?
Sir.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, Isaiah, like, nice to meet you. Wild. Anyway.
Oh my God.
So your Pistons comparison, if he was Isaiah Thomas, at least works on that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. Isaiah was a little bit more confrontational, or at least a little bit more fuck you back in the day. But I swear, like when I used to work in that building, you can cut this if you want to, but I used to work in that, that Turner building where they did that. And I remember one day getting off the elevator and Charles Barkley got on the elevator and it was literally like meeting a building. Like I was like, because I'm fucking short. I'm like 5'4". And I was like, holy shit. It's like a building is a man. And he's like walking into an elevator. I was like, these are the tallest dudes I've ever seen. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine seeing Shaq in person, but Charles Barkley. I was like, holy fuck.
I don't know if I'm going to keep this on the podcast, but that same night, I saw Shaq's penis.
Oh, what? In the studio?
Because he just changed his pants. No, it gets even crazier. And my wife like brings up this story like when we're like meeting strangers, she'll be like, "He saw Shaq's penis." Because he was changing his pants, and he was like, and so it came out for a little bit, and then he just like pulled his pants up, and he looked at me like at this roughly around the same time, and he says, "Yeah, that's a good looking dude right there."
My brain would have just fallen on the floor.
Yeah, man.
What a sequence of events for you.
I was shocked.
Yes. That was a pivotal moment in your life, I will say.
I think so. I mean, as soon as I got home that night, and I believe my quote was, "You can put this on my gravestone."
Yes.
Shaq said I was a good-looking dude roughly at the same time when his penis was out.
Wow.
So.
Dude, that blows my John Carpenter story completely out of the water. That is incredible.
It was quite a night.
Yes.
You could call it the peak of my acting career.
Look, if you do nothing after that, that's like your Citizen Kane moment, really. So, holy shit. Amazing.
Oh, man. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to wrap things up here. Millie, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can people find you, follow you, see what you got coming up next?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm like on all the social media stuff. I mean, honestly, like, it's probably easiest to follow my Twitter. I'm just at Millie De Chirico. I gotta admit, I don't tweet as much as I used to. I really just like follow the Hawks Twitter and then look at the timeline once in a while. But yeah, I'm there. The podcast is I Saw What You Did. It's on the Exactly Right Network. The episodes come out every Tuesday. And you can find that on Apple, Wondery, like all that stuff.
Yeah, you guys were on the Apple Podcast like splash page like a couple weeks ago. That was
like,
crazy.
I was like, what is my photo doing there? I forgot we took those photos, by the way. That was like, we did this weird photo shoot in LA at the very beginning of the pandemic, and Danielle and I were like, I mean, it was like when full sloth mode was happening for everybody. Like, pajama bottoms every day. Like right. I was baking like 2 cakes a day, like eating them alone in my apartment. So I was like,
oh yeah,
it was
cake
like
days.
Full sloth mode. And we were like, oh, we're having our photo professionally taken when we're at our worst, you know? And then for when we saw that splash page, she actually texted me and was like, damn, I forgot we did that photo shoot. I was like, I know. And now we're on the freaking thing. Why? So that was exciting, but also like, it reminded me of not getting your photo taken like that. So,
well, everyone should definitely check out their podcast. I mean, it really is fantastic. They really are like the movie friends you wish you had. Like they it's like you're hanging out. It really accomplishes that pure gold of podcasts where it's like, I'm hanging out with my friends who don't know I exist.
Yes, no, thank you for saying that. I think that's what we want to do. So
yeah, and plus you find out about amazing films. I mean, you guys are pulling like great stuff like all the time. Stuff I've never heard of, never seen, and then a bunch of stuff that I have, and it's great to like relive it with you guys. So
yeah, thanks.
Just love it. And of course, please go out and get TCM Underground 50 Must-See Films from the World of Classic Cult and Late Night Cinema. Fantastic book. I hope you've enjoyed us going through some of these selections today. As always, you can email me, behindtheslatepod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram @behindtheslatepod. And until next time, that's a wrap.